Have you guys guessed what we might be starting this week's episode with?
It's episode 69.
Wait, no,
we're starting with a wee email.
We're starting with an email.
We're starting with 69.
No, we're not starting
We're
with
not
69.
69ing at all.
Nor are we
For those
continuing
listening,
with 69 or ending with 69. No 69 will be happening.
we might end with... You don't know where it's going to go.
Never
I'm going, so you guys can do what you like when I'm gone.
Well, that's fine, because it wouldn't be a 69. If anything, it would be a 669.
Could never rule out 69, can you?
You never can. But what we do have to start this week with is a
nice
review.
It's
a review, yeah. So this is a review. It says so good and 5 stars. So this is a 5-star review, as you can tell. It says, I listen to this podcast on Spotify, so the only reason I'm here is to write a review. Sorry, Apple Podcasts. I have listened to, I think, 6 or 7 of these, and they're so funny. I feel like I'm actually learning something, but I'm not sitting around for 45 minutes being bored. I'm actually enjoying it. Corey gives all sorts of Corey gives all sorts of random facts and also talks over himself about the topic while Luke and James sit around making jokes and comments. I recently finished another podcast and I've been searching for another for so long, and I think this one is great. I would definitely recommend. And a little smiley face.
Wow, thank you very much.
Yeah,
That's
thank
a
you
very
very much.
lovely
Thank you very
and
much.
comprehensive review.
And if you guys are listening on Spotify right now, you should follow suit and go to Apple and just leave a 5-star review. Go do that.
Yes, please. If you're on Spotify, make the move simply to leave a review.
Yes.
That's it.
Just leave a review and then go back to listening on Spotify. Or listen on both. We don't really mind.
To be honest, as long as you're listening, I don't really care what you listen.
Shall we start the show?
Indeed.
Let's start the show.
Hello and welcome to the SCI GUYS, the show where we talk about the crazy, weird, and wonderful stories from the science world. I'm Corey, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jam and Luke Cutforth.
Hello.
Hi.
This week, we're talking about fornication under consent of the king.
What?
Ooh.
You don't know what that means?
Well, it sounds like we're having consensual sex with the king.
No.
I don't want to fornicate with the king. Sorry.
One is not fornicating with the king. One is fornicating under consent of the king.
Do we have to always get the king's consent first?
Well, no, because there's no king, really, is there? There's a queen.
Well, that's why it's so hard.
Yes, very well. I mean, I've been hard for ages, but I've got nothing to do with it. It's insane here.
Let's carry on.
Here at SCI GUYS, we're very passionate about science and education, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy a silly joke every now and then. Today's episode is our 69th, and we all know what that number means. Just you wait until we're 8 years in and we hit the other cool number.
What's the other?
What's the other
669.
What? No.
6.
What's
8
the other
years in.
8 times 52.
6969.
400 and
You're so close.
416.
Oh, it's because it's in weeks.
420.
Oh, it's
420.
420.
Before
69, 420.
Yeah,
okay.
69, 420. Yeah. But today is 69, so we will be talking about
Listen,
sex.
one silly number at a time, please.
What we can only do. Honestly, if we last 8 years, I think we deserve to do a 420 episode, to be honest. But today is 69. We're doing sex today. Not with each other. We're just talking about it. Not talking about sex with each other. We're just talking about sex in general.
Right.
So
Good.
no 69s today.
But hang on.
Apart from the episode.
Oh, we can.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can 69 if you want, consent and all that. It's not my business.
No, thank you. It's not
No?
my cup of tea.
Okay, that's fine. Shall we move on? Do you guys know what sex is?
No.
Oh, look,
I don't know what
Jam
sex
can field
is.
this one for you because
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't know? He's
Nothing
never had
clue.
sex before,
Well,
has he?
he's really not. This is all news to him.
I'm excited to finally have my sex education. I was ill the week we had it in year 6.
The 1 week. Education.
He's been wondering what that thing down there is for his whole life. He's just like...
It's an antenna, Luke. Don't worry. It's for 5G. Sex is when 2 people love each other very much.
No,
and
it's
they...
not. That's not what sex
That's
is,
not what
James.
sex is.
Well, no, they love each other very much, is what my mum and dad told me. And then they take off their clothes and
That's what my mum and dad told me until
they
we got divorced.
wrestle, and then sometimes a baby pops out, depending on who it is.
Wait, depending on who it what?
Depending on who it is, sometimes a baby pops out.
Depending on who? The baby? Who? What is?
No, depending on who's wrestling.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes a baby isn't always possible.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Sometimes a baby doesn't always pop out. But no, that is one way of looking at sex. A slightly better way of looking at sex is
It's called porn.
That's really not. No. Come on.
It's one of the most effective ways of looking at sex.
I mean, it's not. That's like saying the most effective ways of like, looking at human emotion is watching a film.
It's punching someone in the face.
What? No, God. Like porn. Like, to be honest, I think most films are more realistic than porn.
Most films are more realistic than porn. Yes, absolutely. 100% agree.
In fact, I would say Avengers Endgame is more realistic than porn. I'm just waiting for that big purple thumb to come and,
Imagine what porn would be like during the Thanos snap. One person
half of the
would be
people
left
just disintegrate.
How many
naked and confused.
How many people would get a snap kink after that? I mean, like, you're in it with someone, and then suddenly they just pop away, right? But then 5 years later, right? And this is a really long form porn. 5 years later, they suddenly snap back, and you just get right on in it again.
How many people were watching cam girls that just disintegrated on a live stream? They just turned to dust, and they were like, "What the hell's happened?"
Okay, right. That's so true.
That's so true, right?
Okay, here's the thing: how many how many teenagers having sex for the first time, right? Who were like, "Oh no, we shouldn't have sex before marriage," right? Reach the point of orgasm, and suddenly their partner disappears.
Just disappears into thin air.
Satan has taken him.
Mum and Dad were right.
Oh no! Like, honestly, I mean, chances are that happened to someone, and I want to see how
Chances are that happened to many people.
Yeah, I want to see how messed up those kids are, after that. But no, sex. Back to sex. So, you guys understand that our lives are basically finite. Yeah.
What?
What?
Oh, God.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry.
No, what?
Yeah, you're not living forever, in all likelihood.
I have to find out about mortality and sex today? What?
Today is such a bad day.
I mean, sex couldn't really exist without mortality, could it?
No. Well, sex could exist, just not then
Sexual
creating a child.
Okay, so when I say sex, I'm not talking about, the sort of colloquial, I'm talking about sexual reproduction.
Sure. Oh,
Yeah?
okay.
So
Right.
sexual reproduction is what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Sexual reproduction couldn't really exist without mortality. Really? Could it?
No.
Because otherwise,
There'd just be loads of people.
It'd be loads of
There
everything.
would be quite a few.
There'd be lots of everything. You'd run out of space. Then you would need that snap.
You know when you are playing Snake and the snake gets too long and you have no space left and then you crash into the walls? That's what sex would be like if there was no death.
It's like you're just constantly changing your tail. You can't. Yeah.
We would have crashed into the wall a long time ago. Quite a while ago.
Yeah. So because mortality is a thing, and you kind of want a life to keep on going, you got to replicate in some way. And sexual reproduction is just one of those ways. Asexual reproduction is another way, but we're not touching that today at all because sex is too big of a topic to even think about asexual reproduction right now. So yeah, the sort of main thing you want to do is make sure there are more of your sort of kind to continue to be alive for some reason. Just because we don't really know the meaning of life,
nice,
but basically just because.
Yeah,
right?
just because.
Yeah, that's what life does. It just makes more life happen. Sexual reproduction, it happens in plants and animals, but we're not going to be talking about plants today. Mostly in plants, it happens in flowering plants. Pretty much all fruits are done through sexual reproduction. Even the ones that you think aren't done through sexual reproduction are done through sexual reproduction, just sex with themselves. So
what?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how you get a lot of seedless fruits.
But there's a difference between sex with yourself and asexual reproduction.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. We'll get
Just
into that a little bit.
Even more
We'll get into that a little bit later. I mean, so the thing is that asexual reproduction is kind of like is sort of reproducing asexually. The sexual part is sort of I'll get into it later. It's very complicated. But yeah, so you can have sex with there is sex in both plants and animals.
Please don't have sex with plants.
I mean, you can have sex with plants. It's fine.
They can't consent to it though.
Well, they're plants.
Well, you might not know if they want it.
I think they're fine.
Okay.
I think they're good.
Yeah. To be fair.
Although avoid trees.
They don't get much action.
Splinters. That's all I'm gonna say. So yeah, 99% of multicellular creatures. That's the ones that have got more than one cell. Which is probably most of the ones that they reproduce sexually. So sexual reproduction gives you a lot of sort of genetic diversity. It starts with sort of two cells sort of coming together to produce sort of offspring. And once the sort of one cell fertilizes another, sort of a sperm fertilizes an egg, let's say, there's different ways of doing it. This is sort of the general sort of terms. You get a zygote from that fertilized egg, which then grows into sort of embryo, which then grows into whatever it is you're making.
So is the actual specific definition of sexual reproduction the fact that there are two things joined together to make one new thing, like two cells joined together to make a new cell which then reproduces with different genetic code?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, basically. Yeah. So asexual reproduction is basically one cell that's like, yo, I'm going to split and make an identical copy of myself. Yo. And sexual reproduction is like something like either one organism making two separate sexes, two types of sex cells, or two separate organisms
coming together.
Yeah, making well, not necessarily.
Union.
They don't need to come together. The sex cells just need to meet.
One of them needs to come. That's it. Only one.
You're a very selfish lover, I can imagine.
Yes.
So you. I'm not gonna lie. I did think we would have slightly more highbrow humor in this. Slightly, just slightly. No. So yeah, sexual reproduction is sort of coming together of two. Is coming together of two sort of gametes, two sort of sex cells to produce offspring, and that's just kind of the basic overview of sex. So sexual reproduction came after asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is kind of the original, the initial thing, obviously, because it makes the most sense. You just sort of split and you've got more of you. Good, great. Sexual reproduction kind of evolved later, and it's not a single thing. It's got a lot of different sort of parts to it. So there's sort of fusion, recombination, fission, and then also the sort of male-female thing, which is where you've basically got two. I mean, you guys know what male and female are. You've basically got two different one organism that is split into sort of two groups, which can be very similar or drastically different. And they produce sort of different types of sex cells. But then also you've got organisms that are hermaphroditic, which produce both types of sex cells. Basically, sex is just a lot more complicated than we generally look at it to be.
And you have certain, I'm going off memory here, but I believe there's like a certain type of fungi that has like 31 different sexes. Is that the case?
Maybe.
There are more than two types of sex. Like it's more than binary or more than like two ends of a spectrum binary, like two ends of a binary spectrum in other life forms.
So I've seen a few articles here saying that some funguses have over 20,000, 36,000 sexes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Do you know what? Why don't we save this for a SCI Guys Live? So the next SCI Guys Live that comes out, we'll run a little explanation on why that's the case. It could just be headlines. It could not. I've not actually specifically looked into it, although I have heard of it before. So SCI Guys Live, I think this coming Sunday. If not this coming Sunday. Oh wait, hold on. It could have come out already. I don't know. It's SCI Guys Live at some point.
The joys of pre-recording.
I don't know what dates are.
When is this?
Just check it out. It's fine. So the thing is that sex is kind of different in different organisms. Obviously, you've got hermaphroditic organisms. You've got organisms that can change sex, like clownfish or parrotfish. Clownfish, I think, can change from male to female depending on whether there's a sort of dominant female in the group that's died. Usually, I think they've only got one or two females at a time. Parrotfish, I think, change from female to male if there's no male. Yeah, and then there's I think it's earthworms or some type of sort of bug, effectively, that's got both sex organs, but the penis is very big and can sometimes get stuck. And if it gets stuck, then it needs to be bitten off. And then if it gets bitten off, then the organism is effectively a female from that point on.
That's like a sequel to 127 Hours that I wish was.
It is not a sequel you want to watch. Okay,
poor James Franco.
He's just got it's just so hard and gummy. But yeah, no, sex is much more complicated than we generally sort of give it credit for. So how did it evolve is kind of a big question. So the thing is that we've kind of figured out that sex evolves more sort of quickly if a species changes environment rapidly, or the sort of environment changes around the species really quickly. So if sort of all of the genetic changes that have built up over time of sort of from past selections aren't good enough. Sex and recombination. So recombination is like sort of something that happens during sex. We'll get into it later.
Like shuffling the deck.
Yeah, sex lets you share genes between different individuals, and so you can have a bit more variety in the genes that you've got basically present in the new organisms.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think about it, bacteria are basically like their daughter cells. When they split, they're identical, save for some errors here and there, which cause mutations. They're basically identical. Whereas you are not at all identical to your parent, like that just never happens. And the reason that happens, and the reason that's so good, is because it allows for each generation to be very, very different from the last, because you're kind of sharing genes and mixing and matching. And even siblings, so siblings from the same parents, can be drastically different. Like
even twins, weirdly enough. I went to school with two twins who didn't look related. Like, at all. Didn't look like they were brothers.
Not fraternal twins. What they called?
The other ones. I can't remember what the other one's called.
Yeah, so it might be fraternal twins. I don't remember.
Maybe. It's fraternal and identical, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think fraternal twins. Yeah. So that's effectively just being siblings. In the same way that most siblings
happen
are
to be born at the same time.
Yeah, it's just siblings that are born at the exact same time. But so siblings can be like very, very different from each other, and that's a really great thing that sex does. It means that, let's say you've got an environment that's just suddenly changed like really quickly. If you're not able to adapt quickly enough, you're gonna die out. So it's kind of like let's say you've got a disease, right? If you've got sexually reproducing organisms, let's say they reproduce, you've got a new generation. There's going to be quite a few of them there probably that are immune to that disease because they're not genetically identical to the previous generation. Whereas if you've got bacteria, let's say, and you you use an antibiotic, there's a better chance of you wiping them all out, sort of thing. Because there's not that many mutations and changes that can happen. Obviously, there's differences because there are ways of sort of asexual organisms sharing genes between each other, but that's sort of parallel rather than down the line. So overall, sex is basically just a really good way to shuffle the gene pool, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overall, the biggest sort of things that affect sex evolving in organisms is changes of what they need to adapt to. So if there's not enough space, if organisms are less adapted to their environment, or if the environment just changes really quickly, you've got a bigger chance of sex evolving, if that makes sense.
And so how does it happen? How does it go? Like, because an asexually reproducing organism doesn't have, like, how like one of the things they talk about with in evolution is they go, the eye it didn't just spring into existence as it is. It became it gets less and less complex over time, and a light sensing cell, even an individual light sensing cell, was at some point helpful to an organism somewhere. How was sex, if you like track it back from its evolution, how was, like, for want of a better way of putting it, how was like a little bit of sex helpful? Like, how did that, like, because that's a large jump to make between I'm going to split in half to I'm going to find something else and we're going to make a new thing that isn't us.
It isn't actually that big a jump. I think so. Here's the thing: you've got as I've mentioned briefly, single cellular organisms or asexually reproducing organisms do have ways of sharing genes between different individuals. But as I've said, those are parallel. Now, so that's a way. So that's kind of already showing that sharing genetic information is beneficial. So the way that sex is beneficial is that you're sharing genetic information. So even a little bit of sex is beneficial in that sense. So I don't know. I cannot sit here and tell you exactly how sex evolved. What I can tell you is that mitosis, the sort of process by which cells divide, is very similar to meiosis or meiosis, the method by which sex cells are produced.
Right.
They're functionally the same kind of from the start. There's just kind of an extra. The easiest way to think of it is that they're pretty much the same. Meiosis just has a second step to it that sort of splits them into being sex cells.
That's the unzipping, is it? The unzipping of the
well,
two sides
I've got
of the genome.
we've got a whole section on that later on, so I will get to that.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry. Basically, sex can kind of evolve from the sort of normal process for making new cells.
Yeah,
and you can kind of see that in how the processes work. In fact, if you've got two individuals, right, one of them has a gene that is beneficial to surviving in the environment, and one of them doesn't have that gene.
Right.
Now, normally, if you were going to have asexual reproduction, what would happen is they would both reproduce asexually. They'd, let's say, produce one offspring each, or one sort of daughter cell each, and one of those individuals would have the gene that is beneficial to surviving in the environment, and one of them wouldn't. Whereas if those two individuals came together and reproduced sexually, you'd then have two in the next generation that have that. You could potentially you could potentially have two in that next generation that have that gene that is good for surviving in the environment.
And that's assuming that they together produce two offspring.
Yes, I mean if they would have to together produce two offspring at least.
Yeah.
I mean realistically, you have to produce more than two offspring unless you are 100% accurate at always producing offspring.
Which I am.
Are you? How many have you made so far, and how many have they gone on to make?
0 and 0, but 0 have also died, so I have a very good success rate.
Bear in mind, you are not successful at creating. You're not really successful at creating offspring.
That's rude.
Hold on. Bear in mind, you're not really
true.
successful at creating offspring until the offspring that you've created go on to make more.
Right.
Like, if you kind of think of it that way, you can make as many as you want.
But if they all died,
if none of them make it to producing
That is
more,
true.
yeah, then you've failed basically.
Oh,
Yeah,
your
So-
job's not done until
Exactly.
you've got grandkids.
Yeah, so it's not exactly, and that's why parents are always wanting. That's why, like, yeah, give me those grandkids. Let me feel that sweet release of just like I can go now.
my mum gives me just wants grandkids so much. It's just always just like, when are you gonna give grandkids? When are you gonna give grandkids?
Just go buy one and just give it to her. Say I've adopted it. You can have it. You want one so bad? Here you go.
I'll buy her a baby born.
So that's kind of how sex has evolved, if that makes sense. It's kind of, you can understand why it's beneficial because you can in the next generation have potentially way more diversity in the sort of gene pool, and you can spread genes down generations rather than just across generations, which can be really beneficial. And obviously it is really beneficial because there are so many organisms that reproduce sexually. Obviously there's advantages and disadvantages. I'll get to all of those at the end once we've got a good idea of what sex is. And after that, you guys, your sex education will be done, so you can go ahead and have safe sex.
Finally.
Yeah, finally. You've been waiting.
You can finally have
I
sex, Luke.
You two, not anyone listening, just you two.
Oh, okay.
Together.
It's like that situation where we're the last two people on Earth, but it's just me and Jamp.
Oh, like Will I Am.
You mean I Am Legend
I'm
with Will Smith? It's a little bit racist, just a little bit, just
it's
a touch.
because it's I Am Legend
No, I
with
know,
Will Smith.
With Will Smith.
That's where I got that from. I was like, oh, where did I get Will I Am from?
I would love to see Will I Am and I Am Legend though. Will I Am Legend, that'd be great.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, where are we? Okay, so we've kind of figured out how sex evolves, or why sex evolves broadly. So now that we understand that, we realize that we need to have more than one group. Generally, we need to at least have two different types of sex cells to come together. So that kind of brings us on to sex determination, determining what sex an individual is going to be.
Quickly, before you say this, so does that mean that at some point sexual reproduction was happening, but everything was still the same, like all the same gender? Like,
Okay, so
you didn't have specialization into different roles.
So if you look at it, females seem to be the sort of original sex.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
When you look at sort of the Y chromosome, how it's the sort of little almost mutated looking version of
It's
the
like
X
a little
chromosome.
bits dropped off.
Yeah. So
That's-
I remember, and this is not 100%. This is not something that I've read for this and is sourced. This is just something I remember hearing this is something I remember hearing from sort of a teacher in high school, something along the lines of like the potential that sort of maleness evolved as an offshoot of femaleness, and it's so you can kind of see that potential in that parthenogenesis, which is when a female organism, or a female organism can sort of fertilize itself. An egg is fertilized without external sex cells.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of incomplete sexual reproduction. And whether that evolved after sexual reproduction or evolved before and sexual reproduction came from that, I don't know. It depends on the organism. But you can kind of see that females probably came first, or hermaphrodites came first, and then they split off into two different discrete sexes. But hermaphrodites are really common, especially in I think gastropods, are they called? Yeah, gastropods. So sort of snails, you see hermaphroditism in them, earthworms, all those sort of things. They can be both sexes at the same time. So
helpful.
Yeah, it is helpful. So, and even elegans, C. elegans, which we spoke about on a SCI GUYS live episode.
We did.
Those are very, very small flatworms, and those can be both sexes. So that's a difficult question. I guess basically I don't know.
But what you're saying is that at some point, if you go back in time far enough, that at some point every organism was able to reproduce on its own without the need for another version of that organism.
Well, that's asexual reproduction.
Okay.
You go back far enough, you get to asexual reproduction.
Right.
And if you take it that sexual reproduction evolved from asexual reproduction, and at some point, yes, all organisms, and in fact, at this point, still in time, some organisms are able to reproduce entirely without having sex at all.
What I mean is that like at some point in the past, there like yes, so like you're saying with asexual reproduction, at some point in the past, all organisms were able to carry and release some form of version of itself into the world, and we, the male line of evolution, has evolved to not do that. Like that's,
potentially. So this is the thing,
because that's a weird thing.
This is the thing. I am not an evolutionary biologist.
Sure.
So
seems like a big subject.
It's a very big.
Around, yeah.
It's a very big subject. I'm not an evolutionary biologist. I don't study sex specifically. This is way out of my sort of.
This is meant to be the crash course right now.
Yeah,
on sex.
Look, so making those sort of assumptions or hypotheses, I guess. It's not coming from the most informed place that it possibly could. So when I give sort of conjecture, that's based on my knowledge, which isn't it. It's probably more than the average person, but there are evolutionary biologists that could listen to this and be like, no, I know for sure that that's not the case.
Yeah.
So what I do know is that in a lot of species, both sex cells, both sort of the sperm and egg cells, they're not really sperm and egg cells, but both sex cells are pretty much the same. They're the same. Yeah. You've actually got some organisms. I've got it down here somewhere. But you've got some organisms. In fact, most of the ones that we know about that have got highly differentiated sex cells, like the sperm and eggs. Those are really very different and have very specific purposes. So I suppose initially it makes sense that the first sort of organism that reproduced sexually would have probably been hermaphroditic and probably would have been able to reproduce sexually with itself.
Yeah.
Or
that they both reproduce with each other.
Yeah,
like two organisms.
Yeah, or two organisms
fertilized each other.
Or yeah. So those organisms still potentially could reproduce with themselves.
Yes, yeah. Or
given the mechanism, so yeah, that probably, I would say that probably yes. Initially, there was like the sort of organism that was able to both produce produce both kinds of cells,
Yeah.
and it could have even been at that point where there weren't
Different
types of cells.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just organisms produce sex cells, and they can just meet and produce an offspring.
Yeah, all I was trying to extract there and was trying to understand and clarify was that your hypothesis that the female organism was the first original one is based on the fact that it's not possible for you to go back in time and for there to be males without females, because males aren't able to create offspring, whereas like females or hermaphroditic organisms are able to create offspring, whereas males, in the way that we would define a male, is, I assume, not able to create offspring. Although that's not true in seahorses.
No, I'll get seahorses later, but whatever you're about to say about seahorses, you'll be wrong.
What?
It always seems to be the exception to the rule. People always go about how the males get pregnant.
Yeah, they do. Well, yes, they do. Okay, so I'll get
We'll get
there. You know, I've scrolled down, and I do have a little bit on this. So what we're talking about is gametes. Gametes are the sex cells, basically. Those are the cells that come together to produce an offspring. Okay. So gametes can be identical, which is called isogamy, or let's just say isogamy.
Isogamy.
And you've got that in sort of some algae, fungi, and other sort of organisms in that sort of same vein. So if they are the same, identical, then there aren't necessarily really there don't necessarily need to be sexes in the same way that we think about them.
Yeah.
There still could be. Again, not an evolutionary biologist, so I'm not a specialist on any of these different types of sexual reproduction, so I can't say 100% for sure. But the hypothesis that initially there were organisms that were able to produce sort of gametes indiscriminately, that makes sense. Based on my knowledge, that makes sense. So and it's not so much the sort of concept of maleness evolving as an offshoot kind of makes sense if you think of one group of individuals adapting to one group of individuals adapting to producing offspring, and so all of their energy can go to that, and then another group of individuals adapting to doing something else. Evolution is complicated and messy and difficult, and it doesn't necessarily make sense in the way that we want it to. So we always kind of want to give a story to evolution, but sometimes story doesn't really fit the pattern that we want. But I think I don't think you'd be remiss to say that that you sort of maleness evolves as an offshoot from the initial sort of sexual reproduction.
I think it almost makes more sense in my head, again, not an evolutionary biologist, it makes more sense that originally organisms were hermaphroditic, because you can understand how an asexually reproducing organism could then become a hermaphroditic organism that was able to impregnate itself, and then those hermaphroditic organisms, some of them decided decided in quotes, specialized in being offspring producers, and some of them specialized in being offspring fertilizers.
Yeah, and again, I would just as always, as I always say, it would make sense to be very careful about providing a story for evolution. So that does make sense, and that's entirely what could have happened. But adding this sort of story to it is when you sort of enter dangerous waters. And to be honest, the sort of if you even thinking of hermaphroditic organisms as being the first ones, realistically, it could have been organisms that had no discernible difference between the gametes. So the gametes are basically identical. In which case, there's not really sex in the way that we think about it. And you could say that they're technically hermaphroditic, but if there's no difference between the gametes, then are there two sexes?
Hermaphroditic is a binary construct, just that you have both binaries.
Yeah. So if there's only one option for a sex cell, then one could say that sexual reproduction evolved before sex did.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
But then, again, if you're listening to this, I don't want you going and saying sexual reproduction evolved before sex did. That's if anything,
We may have to do a more in-depth episode
Yeah, we're going to have to do
on that specific thing.
because this is let's just
If we can find an evolutionary biologist, maybe.
Yeah, look, how about this? I'll go away and I'll do
Yes,
a
please
whole
go
bunch.
away.
I'll go away. That's it. It's done. Episode
Please,
over.
just go away.
Goodbye. No, I'll go away. I'll do a whole bunch of research on this specific topic, and we can come back and have a 69-2 electric boogaloo.
I'm sorry for being that annoying child in your class who ruins your lesson plan.
It's totally
But,
fine.
sir,
Look,
why?
I'm just glad we're not in a primary school right now because
Why? Why?
Why?
But why?
But sir, why?
But why?
So that is sex. So let's get on to sex determination. So when you've got different sexes, you need to sort of decide which kind of sex an individual is going to be. And there's different ways for doing that. We know probably we know the sort of XY phenomenon, which is present in mammals. And this is what baffles me. So many people seem to spout this as a sort of transphobic rhetoric, sort of the XY thing. We did a whole episode on this, trans brains.
Suddenly everyone's a biologist on Twitter, aren't they?
Go listen to that. I think it's a great episode. But people seem to become experts in sex determination.
No, so many biologists around these days.
Despite the fact that, and they seem to act like X and Y are the only ways that sex is determined in all animals. And that's not quite true. So, as I've said, you need to determine whether an animal will become male, female, or a hermaphrodite, or which, if it can change between sexes or change from one sex to another, which sex it is at the beginning. So, usually that's down to chromosomes. But for some reptiles and fish, that's temperature dependent. So I'm not going to be going too deeply into that because that's a whole other kettle of fish or a whole other can of snakes or whatever you want to call it. Literally, if you have them at a different temperature, a lower temperature, they'll be female or male. At a higher temperature, they'll be the opposite.
And isn't it with bees? Like it's determined by what type of food the what's it called, fetus, like what level of food or what kind of food it ate during.
So I have a thing with bees. And
do you?
Yeah, I've got a little thing. No, I do have a little section on. I think I've got a little section on bees.
Okay,
because bees are also kind of weird. Look,
but they also help plants reproduce, don't they?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. Like bees got a thing for plants.
Yeah, when you get into insects, I mean, when you get into any when you get kind of deeply into any animal, and its sex determination, no laughing. When you get into that sort of topic, it's just there's so many. You can set a rule, and then you'll find there's an exception to that rule. 200
exceptions to that rule,
and then often you'll find there's one that's like it just does it its own way. It's obviously evolution is such that everything is kind of in constant flux, almost you could say. And there are basic fundamentals that kind of stick around because they've been there, for ages. Most cells have got, pretty much all cells have got a nucleus and cytoplasm and all these different sort of and mitochondria and all of that. But then sometimes you'll have things that just kind of change a little bit. And the sex chromosomes are things that are broadly similar, but also not the same among different sorts of species. So, so usually it's down to chromosomes. You guys know what chromosomes are?
Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. I've got it.
They're a part of your DNA, aren't they?
So a chromosome is a sort of structure inside of the nucleus, which is the part of the cell that has all of the information and the DNA and stuff in it. It's in the nucleus of animal and plant cells. Your chromosome is made of protein, and it's a single sort of chain of DNA. And it's basically just it's a sort of structure that makes the DNA sort of compact and fit in the nucleus. So if you were to have all of your DNA in a single cell, unwound from end to end, how long do you think it would be?
Oh, goodness.
A football pitch.
In one cell.
In one cell?
Just in one cell.
A football pitch.
I'm going to go wild. I'm going to say from here to the moon.
Okay. In one cell,
a meter.
It's 6 feet long. You guys are very up.
I was like, to the moon.
But if you think about, you could have a 6 foot long football pitch.
Yeah, it's a very small one.
Little rat.
What is this? A football pitch for ants?
And if the moon was only 6 feet away, very good.
Yeah.
No, but if obviously you've got lots and lots of cells, so if you were to take six times the number of cells in your body, It's very long. So you do have a lot.
That's a lot of feet.
I think that's probably the number that you were thinking of. I feel like, Luke, you were thinking
Maybe it was
of,
in the body. I've heard. I know it's ridiculously long, but
yeah,
I think I was maybe thinking about like the amount of area of your veins or something like that. Some weird
something
thing,
like
or
that.
your nervous system, something like
Maybe.
that.
Who knows? Yeah. So, yeah, that's kind of a chromosome. The reason they're called chromosomes is actually quite interesting. So, chromosome, chroma meaning color, soma meaning body. Yeah. So the reason that they're called that is because scientists, when scientists sort of found them, they're very easily stained. So they take up color very easily. So you can see them in cells very easily when you sort of stain them with a color.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, and they're sort of bodies that take up color. Therefore, colored bodies, chromosomes. It has nothing to do with their function.
They named them that before they knew what they were for.
Yeah. Well, I think they named that when they found them.
Yeah.
So it's great. I love that it's got literally nothing to do with what it does.
Nothing. Yeah, literally.
Absolutely
Just what
nothing.
It looks like essentially.
Yeah, it's
That's all it is.
it's like if I was the Greek for I was just like, white ball or something. It's like nothing to do with what it just looks like a white ball, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Nothing more to it, really.
So humans, how many pairs of chromosomes do we have?
23.
Wow. Very good.
It's
actually 23.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a total of 46 chromosomes.
Some humans have more than 23 chromosome pairs.
On average, yes.
Yeah.
We've got 23, but some people have more. I think that that's the cause of Down syndrome.
Yeah.
Having an extra chromosome.
Oh,
I think it's the
yeah.
14th. Don't quote me on that. I think it's the 14th.
Sounds like you're quoting the amendment or something.
Yeah, the 14th Amendment.
14th Amendment.
Yeah, so and that's the thing. You need the sort of if you don't have the correct number of chromosomes, or rather the sort of average number of chromosomes, so the sort of 23 chromosomes, you'll start to see differences in sort of development and other things. So having 23 is usually essential for life. If you're missing a chromosome, if you've got an extra chromosome, sometimes that can genuinely kill you. Like sometimes a fetus cannot develop if it doesn't have the correct number of chromosomes. If you think about it, it makes sense because your chromosomes, your chromosome is basically it's kind of a way of
It's like the building blocks of you almost.
Yeah, it's kind of a way of bundling up the DNA into neat packages.
It's like it's like you've got a hard drive with your operating system on it, and you're missing a hard drive, or you're missing a folder. Sorry.
Yeah.
Or you've got an extra folder.
Yeah.
An extra folder that's just confusing things. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about DNA, the thing about chromosomes is that the sort of genes that are on a chromosome are very, very consistent. So it's the same parts of the DNA that sort of scrunch up into the chromosomes each time. So that's why you've got the X and Y chromosome. That's why if you're missing a chromosome, or if a part of chromosome's corrupted, you can probably tell what's going on because the same genes are in the same sort of place.
Right.
And that becomes very important later. We'll explain that later, but it's very, very important that on the chromosomes, the genes are in the same order. If that makes sense. It's very important that the chromosomes match each other and are sort of identical throughout the species. So yeah, and that's what a chromosome is. It's basically just a sort of tightly wrapped sort of structure of DNA. If you look up chromosome, it'll look like an X. Now this is the thing you need to remember.
Except the Y.
Except the Y, which does look like an X.
But it's just missing a bit.
Yeah, it looks a little like a Y. It looks a bit funky, to be honest.
Yeah.
Now if you look up chromosome, this is a little bit complicated. It's not that complicated. So they're sort of connected in the middle. They look like X's. And if you split them sort of down the center vertically, each side is a chromosome. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So
like the right two parts of the X and the left two parts of the X are a chromosome each.
Those are a chromosome each. One of them's from your mom, one of them's from your dad. Okay, so yeah, so in mammals, we've got X and Y chromosomes. We know this. It's very straightforward. So the cells from the female usually contain two X chromosomes. So the cells in females usually have two X chromosomes. That's not the sex cells, just your normal body cells. You've usually got two X chromosomes if you're female. Obviously, there's sort of there are differences on this. We kind of touch on it in our trans brains episode. So if you want to know a little more about that, go and listen there. And males, they've got an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is always from your dad, unless there's some genetic anomaly. But like realistically, it is literally always from. It's pretty much always from your dad. I don't want to say it's
Yeah.
always from your dad because there's bound to be like one case where someone with,
There are instances of it, which is the thing.
I
But
mean,
it's like as a general rule.
I mean, I say there are instances of it. None are coming to mind instantly, but I don't want to say it's not entirely, it's entirely impossible because it could be. The fact is that if you think of it as being impossible, you'll get along fine. Your Y chromosome generally comes from the male parent.
Mhm.
So yeah, occasionally you can be born with sort of XXY or XYY or just one X chromosome or 3 X chromosomes. And there's loads of different things that result from that, which we're not going to get into right now
Yeah.
because it's a whole topic of its own. Even one of those, let's just say if we were to go with just XYY or XXY, just one of those would be an entire episode in and of itself.
Where does the extra chromosome go? Does it go in the little packet with the other chromosomes?
How do you mean?
So like if you've got your like in most situations, the two sides of the chromosome, one from each parent, join together and make like a X shape, and they're inside of a little packet.
So that's only the chromosomes only really sort of come together during the chromosomes only really sort of come together during mitosis or meiosis.
Okay.
Normally, because the chromosomes aren't sitting there all the time. Normally, the DNA is kind of it's not always ordered into chromosomes, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that at all. So that's really interesting.
Okay. Yeah. So we've known for quite a while that the Y chromosome is what determines sex. Basically, if you've got Y chromosome, you're going to be male usually. Pretty much all the time,
Mhm.
you're going to be male. And the reason for that is the SRY gene, which is on the Y chromosome, and that basically sort of kickstarts male development. So we actually said the other week that basically every embryo is every zygote is female.
Mhm.
That's not quite true. They're undifferentiated. They're not exactly female. They're undifferentiated. But without the SRY gene, they will
Develop.
They will develop
Into the female. Yeah.
So the way that works is effectively you've got these sort of undeveloped sort of sex organs. They're sort of undifferentiated, really. Gonads, you can really call them undifferentiated gonads, and it can either develop into testes or ovaries. Now, if the SRY gene is there, then it'll make the gonad develop into testes, which will then produce testosterone, which will then make the sort of the embryo or develop as the fetus develop as male. And without that SRY gene, then the sort of the ovary sort of forming thing is activated by a different set of proteins, and the ovary that then develops will then produce estrogen, which will then produce the uterus, oviduct, and all of the other stuff from the undifferentiated sort of initial form. If that makes sense. Yeah. So you got the SRY gene, which is on the Y chromosome. You develop into male. Otherwise, some other stuff goes on, and you develop into female.
Okay.
Yeah?
That makes sense.
That's very straightforward. Yeah. So that's mammals. That's very straightforward because that's what we know. Let's talk a little bit about insects. Insects are a bit weird. They don't have XY. They've got they've got Z, W.
I was going to make a joke and be like, have they got a Z?
Yeah,
they actually do.
They've got Z and W.
Does it look like a Z?
Huh? No, it's not that it looks like that. It's just what we call it.
Okay.
Right. And it's more complicated. So they don't necessarily need 2 chromosomes.
Right.
For sort of sexual differentiation. So you can have Z0, so that's Z with no W. That will develop into female, with some things, that will develop into females. ZZ will develop into males. And and I think ZW will also develop into female.
So there's 2 sexes, but there's multiple ways of getting there.
Yeah,
it's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah, and the thing is that it's different. It's different for a lot of different things. So like there's a moth. There's this kind of moth that uses temperature to determine the sex if there's no W chromosome. So the way to think about it is the presence of a W chromosome will usually result in females. But if there's not 2 Z chromosomes, then it will usually be female. So you need 2 Zs to be male, and a W to be female. But if you've only got 1 Z and no W, then you'll probably develop into female.
And then that's dependent on temperature?
Just for that kind of moth.
Right.
Just for that moth.
Just for that moth.
Just for that
Just
moth.
to make things a bit more confusing.
Well, probably other things as well, but
We haven't found it yet.
the example is that moth. It's kind of the reverse of the human things, where females have 2 different types of chromosomes. So your chromosomes are 2 different types, the Z and W, and males have the same type of chromosome. They've got to have ZZ
Right.
to be male. Yeah? Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah.
And there's some mosquitoes that have their sex chromosomes are indistinguishable. They're the same.
So what determines the sex then?
I'm really not sure. I'm gonna be honest. Like, there's
We just don't know.
and some grasshoppers use single chromosomes. So either XX or X0, which means, so if you've got 2 X
and nothing.
Yeah. So if you got 2 X chromosomes, I think 2 X chromosomes, then you're female. 1 X chromosome, then you're male.
Right.
And yeah, but it's very confusing. I think the point here is not to take away a complete understanding of how insect chromosome determination works.
Good, because I'm not going to.
No, I don't expect you
doing
to.
the quiz.
Because it's very complicated.
The point is to go away understanding that sex and sex determination is very complicated.
Yeah, I would
And
look on
more complicated than just XX and XY.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look into this all you want. I think it's very interesting, and honestly, I've read a little bit, and I got quite interested, and I'm going to read some more. The reason that I've had to cut this is because, again,
It's just so complicated.
entire episode on its own. All of these things could be an entire episode on their own. Let's go into birds really quickly. Bird sex is also determined by Z and W. Females have Z and W. Males have I think ZZ. Yeah. It's quite complicated. There's also some things apparently you can you can convert a genetically male chicken into a female if you inject the eggs with estrogen at the right stage of development.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. And that's all it takes.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not all. I mean, it's not all it takes. In that, because the females have, But
then it's something to do with
ZW.
hormones as well.
Yeah, because the
not
females
just
have.
chromosomes.
The females have ZW. That will basically trigger. Sort of the female pathway. But if you introduce the estrogen in there at that time, that can also trigger that pathway without the chromosome.
Okay.
But yeah, it's also that determination system is also we found it in reptiles, fish, and amphibians as well. In some of those, it's difficult because they've got a different type of gene. They don't have the SRY gene, like mammals have. They've got a different type of gene. So in chickens, we found the DMRT1 gene. So in mammals, that forms testes, and in chickens, that's the kind of gene that we found that kind of determines sex. But again, this is all really, really complicated stuff. So it's just there's not much point on this show of trying to condense this down into a really simple digestible format. The whole point is that it is really, really complicated. If you want to simplify it, write down in birds they've got Z and W. Females have ZW and males have ZZ. That's it at its very simplest.
Right.
It's basically the reverse of humans and other mammals. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So a lot of
Being
letters
that
and a lot of different combinations going on.
So what you're saying there, just in case anyone missed it, is that, and just to clarify for myself as well,
go ahead.
is that in mammals, having 2 copies of the same chromosome, XX, results in you being female most of the time.
Yeah.
and in birds, having 2 copies of the same chromosome ZZ or
Yes.
WW, ZZ,
ZZ.
results in you being male. So the distinction being there that it's the opposite in terms of having the same chromosome pairs results in a different sex depending on whether you're a bird or you're a mammal.
Yes, but also that where the ZW thing can be the same for some reptiles and amphibians and fish.
Now, Corey, just before we hit record on this episode, you teased me with some information that frogs don't have penises. So can you please explain?
Oh yeah, you did just drop that in there, didn't you?
That's the next section.
Great. I'm doing my job here.
Yeah. But sorry, you did mention bees.
Yes, I did mention bees.
I think I have been led to believe that bees have an X zero sort of determination system. So I think if a bee sort of, I guess, egg is left unfertilized, it can develop into a bee, regardless of being fertilized or not, which makes it X0.
But that determines, I think, the sex as well.
Yes.
I think I can't remember which sex it is, but unfertilized bee, whatever it is, eggs, they are only ever become one type of sex, which I think is female.
Let's find out.
I think that's true. Which means that bees can asexually and sexually reproduce. Which is
no, they can't asexually reproduce. It's still sexual reproduction.
Sorry, but bees can create clones of themselves, or they can create a collaboration with another bee.
A collaboration.
Awful.
A drone is a male. So a male honeybee is a drone. Yeah. So they've only got one. So I think if
So it's males.
yeah.
not
So I think
females.
if a honeybee's egg, I think, is left unfertilized, it will I think it will develop into a male drone, and its purpose is to mate with an unfertilized queen.
And start a new hive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess produce a new queen. The queen then goes off, makes a new hive. The fact is that
Right.
ultimately we could sit all day, and I mean literally all day.
Yeah.
And go through all the different species of animals and all
Oh,
the differences between them.
Yeah, I mean, and then we'd have to take a break and then continue for the rest of our lives.
Yeah,
But we could talk about the idiosyncrasies of every animal and the sort of sex determination and how they do it. But there's no point in doing that because there's a lot of it. And if you're interested, I would genuinely recommend looking into it. I've got lots of links in the description for this. So go ahead and have a look. But now we're getting on to the good stuff. How does sex work? How does it work, guys?
Quite effectively.
How does
Sometimes.
sexual reproduction work, or how does sex work?
How does sexual reproduction work?
Well,
Sometimes with in mammals, it's usually with a willy, and then they put it in the vagina.
God, James.
That's sex ed 101.
I'm going to take a better crack at this.
To be honest, I don't think you couldn't. I don't think there is a crack that could be worse.
So you have some form of cell that has these 2 chromosome pairs, these 2 sides of the genetic code. Sorry, 2 sets of chromosome pairs.
Do you know what? I'm going to stop you there because you're on the right. No, you're on the right track.
Okay.
You've jumped ahead a step, right?
Oh, have I?
Yeah, you're going into.
willies.
Yeah,
I'm too keen.
you're jumping right into sex. Luke is thinking about the foreplay.
Unzipping.
And when I say foreplay,
see.
when I say
This is why I
foreplay,
never have good
I mean the
sex.
creation,
the creation of sex cells.
the creation of the sex cells. Because there's no point in having sex if you don't have the sex cells to,
I disagree, but
Oh, well, I suppose. Yeah. Genetically, there's no point in having sex if you don't
Sure.
have the sex cells to, back yourself up.
Yeah, true. I
So-
jumped the gun a bit, didn't I?
there's a willy.
I was a bit premature with that.
That's not surprising for you. So gametes. We've spoken about gametes very briefly already. Those are the sex cells. Those only have one set of chromosomes. So those are haploid. Haploid just means you've got half the sort of normal number of chromosomes. I guess you've got diploid as well, or a diploid, which are what pretty much all of our body cells are. They've got 2 sets of chromosomes. So diploid, diploid, 2 sets of chromosomes. Haploid, just 1 set of chromosomes. You got that?
Yeah.
Cool.
Good
So
use of that.
yeah, so that means that they've got half of the sort of all of the genes that they need to make a new thing, a new living organism.
If you're listening to this at home and don't understand what that means, if you imagine an X, and now imagine that X is only got its left side,
It's cut in half.
or it's only got its right side. Yeah, it's cut in half.
Often I enjoy imagining my X is cut in half.
Oh. All right, moving swiftly along.
Whoa. Jeez. Whew. Yeah.
So yeah, effectively, they've got one set of chromosomes, and that means that they can join with another sex cell to make a cell that has two sets of chromosomes.
Yes, they can.
Yeah, which is, as we know, is what we want. So gametes are formed through a process called, as I've said, meiosis, meiosis. I've heard lots of different pronunciations.
Mayonnaise.
No, never
that's,
that one.
That's the one that it isn't. It's close, but it's not.
Meiosis.
So meiosis. Okay. So yeah, that means that so gametes are formed from germ cells, which are basically that's in humans. These are just the cells that produce gametes. So we'll go into meiosis in just a second. But during fertilization, the gametes fuse that produce a diploid, as I said, a cell with both sets of chromosomes. It's got all the genetic information that it needs to be a whole thing on its own. Good for it. That means that it can start.
Good for it.
Yeah, good. So these two cells basically come together to produce one cell that has all of the genetic information that it needs, and that cell's like, yo, I'm gonna split, and it starts just dividing and making a bunch more cells, and then suddenly it turns into you. I say suddenly. It takes a good while, but
multiple months.
Yeah, I mean
nearly a year.
Years, one could say, really, to be a fully grown thing.
Oh, then even after that, yeah.
Yeah, you still got some growing to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's the thing. That's what's insane to me. Like from your parents, you've got two cells that come together to make one cell that then grows into you. So everything that you are came from one single cell.
Wow.
Whole human being.
Yeah.
I remember it well.
No, you don't.
You keep saying
Stop.
this.
Hey guys, do you remember being a sperm?
I don't know who you're.
I remember being a sperm.
Do you not remember being an egg? Surely you would remember both.
No.
Yeah.
I forgot the egg bit because I'm vegan.
Because you're sexist.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Oh yeah, you can only focus on one at a time, can't you? Really?
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on.
Maybe my other half remembers being an egg.
I don't think.
The other half of what?
The other half of me.
Left brain remembers being an egg.
Yeah.
Right brain remembers.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Exactly.
see.
Yeah.
I see.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. They still not come together.
But only
trying.
one
No.
side of me has access with the voice box, so he can't tell you what it was like to be an egg.
Right. Okay.
What does
Just
the other side have access
silencing
to?
women
I
yet
could
again.
draw it. I could draw it, James. You're not
Oh,
listening in my episode
okay,
about split brains.
So as I've already said, gametes can be identical, isogamy, or they can be different. They can have more than one sort of type. So in the sort of humans and most things we know, they've got two types that are heavily specialized. This is called oogamy in terms of which is the
Ooh.
yeah, ooh. But that's the sort of prefix that you got for egg, isn't it? Like
Ovo. Yeah.
Well, yeah, ovo.
Ovum, over. Yeah. Ooh.
No, ooh, that's the initial sort of sound you've got
Ooh.
from that. So oogamy, that's where one of the gametes is small and motile, and the other one is large and non-motile. What that means is one of them is really little and swims about, and the other one just sits where it is and is really big and does nothing. I mean, it does stuff, but it's really big.
Does a lot of stuff though.
Does most of the
Carries
work.
all the food, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The initial food.
Yeah,
It's not nothing.
It just sits
We've
there.
had a long
Provides.
swim. Need something to eat.
Nom, 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 nom. Come home after a long day of swimming, you just want your egg to be there.
My big egg.
I mean,
Give me food.
the egg must be giant to that sperm as
Yeah.
well. That's like, bro, this is great.
Fills the whole living room kind of egg.
It's like an ostrich egg, you know? An ostrich egg
It's a
is like
dragon's egg, straight up.
an ostrich egg is like 20, I think is worth 28 or 24 chicken's eggs.
What?
Yeah. So if you want to have a big breakfast, just get an ostrich.
But I think ostrich eggs are actually really quite small compared to the size of an ostrich.
Well, yeah, ostriches are quite large, aren't they?
Yeah.
Quite a bit bigger than a chicken as well.
I suppose, yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose an ostrich egg could be bigger than a chicken, conceivably. I mean, yeah, I was going to say you could fit a chicken inside of an ostrich egg, but then I realized you can fit a chicken inside the chicken egg, and that's kind of the point.
That's where the chickens come from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's their whole thing. So yeah, as I said, Ugamy is that whole thing where you've got two sort of specialized gametes, and that's a type of heterogamy, which just means different gametes. So the gametes are different. So the opposite of that, as I've said, is I've lost it. The opposite of that is isogamy.
So it's not a homogamy.
No.
Oh,
don't know why.
Shame.
Weird naming convention, isn't it?
yeah.
But you've also got anisogamy, which means that there could be more more than one sort of type.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's sort of gametes. So I'm going to be talking when I talk about meiosis, I'm going to be talking broadly about humans. You can kind of apply it to mammals. You can kind of apply it to other things as well. But if anyone wants to sit in the comments and be like, actually, that's not the case for okay.
This
look,
doesn't apply to this specific species of animal.
if it's not the case, then I'm not talking about that one. Okay, that's
This is not going to be a 30-hour podcast episode.
I'm not. Yeah. So because obviously, as I've said, this whole time we've been ignoring plants, and the reason we've been ignoring plants is because I don't want to have to talk about plant sex.
No.
Because it just adds a whole other dimension. And here's the thing.
We'll do that another time.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're allergic to pollen, you are allergic to plant semen. So do with that what you will.
Probably
Hay
the
fever.
best.
Yeah, hay
Not
fever
the
is
worst thing to be allergic to.
hay fever is just sneezing over plant semen. That's all it is. They get it in your eyes. It's very rude. Anyway, meiosis or meiosis or meiosis, whatever you want to call it.
What do you want to call it?
So you guys must have heard about this before. I'm sure. Did you do it in school at all?
Yeah, but I can't remember it very well.
That's fair enough.
Briefly, I just knew it was the opposite of not the opposite, but a different to mitosis.
Yeah, so I mean, you usually get taught it alongside of mitosis because it's kind of similar to mitosis, but then it kind of shoots off. It takes a left turn. It's like, yo, bro, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm doing my own thing. So it's kind of a really specialized form of cell division, which is, it's really similar to mitosis. What it does is it makes your gametes. So, as I've said, in humans, it's germ cells that do this, that undergo meiosis, to make your gametes. Now, germ cells before a meiosis will have 46 chromosomes. Oh shit! Hold on. Yeah. So at the start they've got 46 chromosomes, and by the end, when they've produced gametes, those gametes have sort of 23 chromosomes on its own. So as I've said, half the number that they would that a normal cell would have. So with meiosis, you basically produce 4 cells from one cell. You produce 4 daughter cells from one cell. Yeah? So you start with 1, you end with 4.
How?
I'm about to tell you.
Good question.
So if you to break it down to its absolute basics, it's kind of a 2-stage process.
Yeah.
You've got meiosis 1 and 2. So you can divide those into 4 stages as well. Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase.
Right.
PMAT is the easiest way to remember it.
Yeah.
But before any of this starts, you've got to duplicate your chromosomes because you need double. Because if you think about it, if you've got 46 chromosomes in the initial cell, if you're going to split those twice, you're not going to end up with 23.
No.
You're going to end up with
11 and a half.
Yeah. 11 and a half.
That's
good
not
maths.
a good number.
That's not the number of chromosomes that you want. No, it's not. And what we were talking about earlier, you can actually see where this kind of probably would have derived from mitosis, because it doesn't really make sense to do it this way, does it? It doesn't make sense to double it and to produce 4.
Unless you are asexually reproducing.
Unless you've already got a mechanism by which you double your DNA and produce 2 identical cells.
Yeah.
All you need to do is take that process and be like, let's add an extra step. Let's just split again. And that's effectively what it is. So this is interphase, which is the starting part before it even really begins. So the DNA just sort of bunches up into chromosomes, and the chromosomes replicate so that you've now got double chromosomes that are joined at the center, which is called the centromere. those kind of roughly look like the letter X. Yeah.
Right.
So you've got basically at that point, because every chromosome is doubled, you've basically got 90 sort of basically kind of 92 sets of chromosomes split. So and they're all sort of, there's homologous pairs. So obviously because you've got 2 sets of each chromosome, both of those sets double, which means you've now got 23 sets of double chromosomes. You've got
so many.
Okay, so you've got 23 sets of chromosomes, right?
Yeah.
And in those sets, you've got 2 X's each, basically, because each initial chromosome has duplicated itself to make an X, and its homologous pair has also duplicated itself to make an X, and that's really important. You've got it's really important that you get in your head. You've got those 23 pairs, and I say 23. This is just for humans. Other animals have got different numbers of chromosomes. I think apes and whatnot, chimps, they've got 24.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So this 23, it's only for humans, and it could be for other things, but we're only really talking about humans. Just swap out the 23 for whatever number the other animals have, whatever number the other organisms have. So once you've done interphase, which is again the chromosomes forming and then duplicating, and being sort of joined at the center, you get into meiosis 1, which is that sort of first big stage that I spoke about, and the first part of that is prophase 1. So just like in mitosis, the chromosomes match up with their homologs. As I've said, they've got you've got your X's that are kind of identical. They kind of come together and they match up. Now, what they do there is this really interesting process called sort of crossing over, and that's the part that makes sexual reproduction really, really great, because you get recombinant genes. So what's happening is these two identical sets of chromosome pairs are lining up together exactly. And remember earlier on when I said that your genes need to be in the right place?
Yes.
Yeah. This is why, because at this point, these genes can kind of swap over between chromosomes. So you've got your chromosome sort of, you can have your chromosome sort of switching individual sort of genes and parts over across each other and swapping them with the other pair of chromosomes.
Right. So this is where I think, if I'm understanding correctly, this is where you get the variation between each individual gamete having different parts of your overall genome. Yeah.
So if the way to think about this is, if you've got, so let's say a parent is undergoing meiosis, right? They've got a chromosome from their mum and a chromosome from their dad, broadly speaking. Yeah. So what would really happen if we didn't have recombination is that if those chromosomes doubled and split into all those daughter cells, you would still be just passing down basically the same chromosome that your mum passed to you, and the same chromosome that your dad passed to you.
It'd be like an identical Y and an identical X if it was a male, or 2 identical X's. Yeah.
So in this case, what's happening is you've basically got the chromosome. You've basically got the chromosome that your mum, the chromosome that your mum gave you, swapping genes with the chromosome that your dad gave you, so that when you then, like, you know, your gamete goes off and produces offspring, your child won't have oh, they've got like just the chromosome that my dad gave me or the chromosome that my mum gave me. They'll have like a mix of genes from both of your parents.
That's really clever, because then even before your parents' genetics mix, like their chromosomes mix, it's already diversified a bit. It's already a little bit different.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So this is how you is this how you get things that skip generations?
Yeah, you can get things that that's also to do with expression and so that's okay. So the reason that you can get things that skip generations is that you can have recessives and express different sort of gene expression, and genes are very complicated. We like to make it as simple as dominant and recessive, but there's a little more than that. So that could be a factor in how things skip a generation, but also like it's just this really cool thing where chromosomes are basically just swapping bits of information with each other. Yeah. And again, as I've said, that's why they've got to be sort of exactly sort of the same, because you don't want to swap, say an eye color gene for a gene that makes your heart. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, and I've got a gene for blue eyes and a gene for green eyes, but also I've traded away the gene that makes my heart
Yeah.
makes my
The
heart
eyes
like
probably
grow.
don't give good instructions for operating the heart.
Exactly.
No, yeah.
So
You're right.
yeah, so since all the genes are sort of basically broadly in the same place, that means that when you're crossing over, you can basically swap over. Say your dad's got a gene for ginger hair, and your mom's got a gene for, say, black hair. You can then have a chromosome that just swaps over. So those you've basically got the chromosome that your dad gave you, but with the hair gene that your mom would have given you. So those chromosomes are just like basically totally different than the ones that your parent gave you. And that means that it's different for all of that means it's different for all of those gametes. Every single one of those 4 gametes produced from this sort of thing of meiosis are completely different. And they have to be, because
can't be too similar.
They have to be because of obviously variation, but like the chances of those being the same is ridiculously small, which is again why siblings, despite being from the same parents, you'd expect them to look quite similar. Can look entirely different because different genes could have been crossed over.
Do we have any concept of what determines which genes go to which gamete, or is it just random?
What do you mean?
So, like, if I've got my 92 chromosomes, and I'm doing this process where I'm swapping some across from like some of the stuff my mum gave me, some of the stuff my dad gave me, in order to make sure that every gamete I send out is then individual and different. What determines whether, for example, my hair gene for this color of hair crossed over to this gamete, and my hair gene from my dad.
So it's not crossing over between gametes; it's crossing over between the chromosomes.
Sure. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. That's. Yeah, I'm explaining this badly because I don't know 100%. I don't 100% know the science. What I mean is that what determines, is it just randomness which genes cross over between the chromosomes?
Yeah, it's recombinant. So crossing over, it does. Any of the genes can basically cross over between the chromosomes. Oh, apart from this is the thing. X and Y genes, they don't. The X gene isn't homologous to the Y gene.
Yeah,
that doesn't really happen.
Okay.
Because they're kind of different. But so yes, the genes that cross over are just random. There's
right.
It's I mean, yeah, as far as I remember, random. So it's not like there's a set sort of, okay, so we're going to cross over the hair gene now. We're going to cross over. It is just random. So you can do this process as many times as you want. The chances of you getting the same genes crossing over, very slim. I think I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but the number of possible like sort of iterations of like individual genetics from this process are astronomical, to the point where it is functionally impossible for you to produce 2 identical sort of gametes.
Wow.
Which is why in time travel movies, you never go back to before you had a kid, because if you come back afterwards, you will not have the same kid.
Literally, you just breathe and there'll be a different kid.
Yeah. Like it's like just that. Oh, totally different. Totally different. And it could be like, you could think, oh, it could just be hair color. What? It could be literally completely different kind of kid. It's wild.
Even down to like the time of conception, right?
Yeah.
Even a difference of like a minute or 2.
Yeah.
Milliseconds.
So
of
I mean, the amount
difference.
of if you think the amount of sperm the amount of sperm that you produce.
Yeah.
All the different factors that go into an individual sperm reaching an egg, and so it's insane. So that's prophase. Basically, that's just that's not even prophase over. So you've got those you've got those chromosomes crossing over, and then you've got these sort of spindle fibers which then grab the chromosomes effectively and move them to the center of the cell, which is called the metaphase plate. That means that you've got all the chromosomes set up in the middle now, right? And that means that they're ready to sort of be pulled apart. So each chromosome is attached to a microtubule from just one side of the cell. So each individual sort of chromosome pair isn't being pulled apart. So the ones that are joined at the centromere, those aren't being pulled apart.
Right.
It's the homologous pairs that will be separated. Does that make sense? So the X's aren't being the X's aren't being pulled apart to not be X's. Each pair of X's will be separated so that they're an individual X on the other side of the cell. Does that make...
Yeah.
Okay.
I
think I get what you mean. I think I'm maybe just overthinking it.
Yeah. So you've got 23 pairs of X's, right?
Yeah.
So those 23 pairs of X's line up in the middle of the cell, and after metaphase, so they line up in the middle of the cell. That's the end of prophase, and they get sort of attached to these spindle fibers. And in metaphase, what happens is that those 23 pairs of X's are separated, so that you then got just 23 individual X's on either side of the cell.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So you've still got X's, they're just on opposite sides of the cell. Now, the interesting part here is that it's not sort of one set of chromosomes on one side and the other set of chromosomes on the other side. You can have, like, let's say you've got your mum chromosome and your dad chromosome, to put it simply. It's not like on one side mum chromosomes and on dad's side, on the other side dad chromosomes. It could go mum, dad, mum, whatever. You know, there's no sort of order. That's random as well.
Because they were all shuffled up.
Yeah, so that's another layer of randomness.
Right. Okay.
So while you've got the right chromosomes on the right number of chromosomes and all the right chromosomes on either side, they're not necessarily all, like, you know, from the same parent. So on top of, like, crossing over and having those recombinant chromosomes with just different genes swapped over onto them, you've also got chromosomes there's also another layer of randomness there, in that you won't have all the chromosomes from the same parent in each gamete. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Just say yeah,
Just
that's
about.
fine. And then you've got anaphase, where they're pulled apart. So metaphase is where they line up at the metaphase plate. And basically, like I said, which side of the metaphase plate they're on is random.
Seems to be quite a few layers of randomness here.
Yeah, that's the point. It's good.
That is the whole point of it. Yeah.
And then it's anaphase, where they're pulled apart to opposite ends of the cell. And like I said, the X's still stay together, so the chromatids still stay together. And then you've got telophase. And this is all sort of all metaphase 1, anaphase 1, and this is telophase 1, where the chromosomes are at the opposite sides of the cell. And in some organisms, the nuclear membrane will reform. In other ones, it doesn't. Obviously, the nuclear membrane reforming is just a pointless holdover from mitosis, because you don't need it to reform because you're about to pull it apart again. So in some organisms, the nuclear membrane will reform, and then the cell splits. This is called cytokinesis. It just means cyto, cell, kinesis, move, cells moving away from each other. So the cell splits into two cells from one. So that means that you've got one cell with with one set of chromosomes and another cell with another set of chromosomes. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now we're halfway through the process. We've got meiosis 2. But don't worry, because it's literally the exact same. It's basically the exact same thing again. So the difference here is that you don't copy the DNA again. So what's happening?
You already did it, because you have 92 pairs.
Exactly. So you've in each
Or
of these.
92.
What?
92 pairs or 92?
92.
92, yeah.
23 chromosomes initially, which are two sets of
Doubled,
each, and they double. Yeah. So you've
92.
Yeah, so you've got 92 chromosomes, and then you've split
You
those.
want to end up with 23 halves, don't you?
Yes.
To send off to the eggs or to receive the sperm.
So now what you've got two cells, each with 23 pairs of chromosomes. So basically the same thing happens again. You've got prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase, but this time we don't have a cell duplication. We don't have chromosome duplication at the start.
Yeah.
So instead of sort of pairs of chromosomes being pulled apart, pairs of X's being pulled apart, what happens is they move to the center. The spindle fibers come and they take each side of the X and they literally pull the X apart so that it's no longer an X. And then you've got 23 individual chromosomes on each side of the cell, which then splits, cytokinesis. So you've got then 4 cells, because remember this is happening to 2 cells at once. So you've now got 4 cells with 23 chromosomes. Those are your gametes.
Right.
Yeah?
So that's 23 chromosomes that are awaiting to be joined up to the other person's chromosomes.
Yeah.
So you've sort of got it's like a cell, and it's got half the number. It's got 23 chromosomes, but they're not paired to another set of chromosomes. So they're kind of like half cells from a genetic perspective.
Yes, they're haploid.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's the thing. It's really, really, this is fantastic because at this point, you can now see how much randomness goes into this process.
Yeah.
So you've now got all of your gametes, and it's just a case now for getting your gametes to join. But here's the thing. In females, in human females, we've got 4 gametes.
Yeah.
But we don't use all 4 of them. What happens is you've got 3 of them that are probably smaller, and those are called polar bodies. Those don't really do anything in humans as far as we're aware. Now, the reason they're smaller is, remember when the cells are splitting?
Yeah.
Now, what the cells do before that is they've got a lot of other stuff inside of them. It's not just the chromosomes. They've got all of their, they've got what they called. They've got mitochondria. They've got other organelles. They've got a lot of different things inside the cell. So when the cell is splitting, one cell could have a bit more of that stuff than the other ones.
Yeah.
So that'll be bigger, and it's got more resources. So what happens is the biggest one at the end of that process is the one that develops into an egg. That one gets to be an egg, and the other 3 don't get to be an egg at all. They just shoot off. They're done. They're useless. Yeah.
Right. In the bin.
Interestingly, on this this process where these you're sort of creating these gametes in human males, that happens in the testes. During both are fine.
Yeah.
During like our post-birth life, it's happening to us right now, right? Good work, guys.
Speak for yourself, but yeah, I'm working hard.
And but in human females, that happens, as far as I'm aware. You are born with all the eggs you're going to have. Like, so it happens in the womb, then I assume.
Yeah, so it does happen in the womb, and there's kind of like sort of arresting of the process at some point down the line. So you kind of basically produce all of the eggs that you've got, and then you produce all of the sort of gametes that you've got, and then they develop. They're kind of wrapped in a follicle. They develop into sort of they fully develop into proper eggs, and then they're released.
Yeah.
And that's what menstruation is. That's why you have your periods, if you have it.
Yeah.
Because your body's like, here's an egg. You're not pregnant.
Oh,
fine.
You don't want it. I guess
Screw
I'll get
you
rid of it
then. I
Yeah.
guess. You want pain for a few days? You got it.
Sure.
So
Give me a
punishment for
baby.
not using it.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Basically, your uterus is kind of like a parent that really wants grandkids.
It
But will
is.
hurt you until you get them.
Unlike most grandparents. I mean, parents. I guess.
Hurt you emotionally. Who knows? But yeah, so that you are right. Yeah, that does happen in the womb for human females, and in males it happens
all the time.
Well, not all the time. After puberty.
After puberty, yeah.
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 And just keeps on going. They just keep trucking, man. They
It
just
never stops.
they will not stop. And to be fair, most teenage boys waste them, so it makes sense. I just mean, imagine if you had a finite number, right? Teenage, like the human species.
Actually, I think I asked my dad that question one time when we had the talk. I was like, "Do we have infinite of them, or do we have a limited amount?" And he was like, "Don't worry, you got enough."
How many times can I masturbate till I'm infertile? Is the real question you're asking there? No, I mean, honestly, if that was the case, I am certain that the human species would have long since died out. Like,
yeah, most people would be running out, I think.
yeah, I mean, honestly, as soon as we developed sort of internet porn, like, we're done. That's it. We're gone.
That's it.
Because teenage boys, they find that, and then boom,
Human extinction.
human extinction.
That's it.
God. Anyway, so that's this is the thing. Like I said, in humans, we've got those 3 polar bodies, which are the small gametes that don't turn into eggs. We've got the big gamete that does turn into an egg. And in humans, polar bodies are, as far as we're aware, kind of basically they don't really do anything. But in other creatures, they can be used for something. So in some animals, they're used for parthenogenesis, which is, as you guys know, the production of an offspring without the fertilization of an egg from another individual, basically. Yeah. So, and then also, in some plants, they can be used to produce, these polar bodies can be used to produce tissues that protect and nourish the embryo.
When you say that those, I forget the name already, but weak eggs,
Polar bodies.
polar bodies are part of parthenogenesis, is that where one of the main eggs would be fertilized with a polar body instead of with a sperm?
Yeah, basically, the haploid cells come together to produce a diploid cell, which
Right.
can then produce offspring. Yeah, which is what I say, which can then produce offspring, which then develops into another organism.
Is that a potential line of inquiry for the possibility of same-sex couples making offspring?
Well, I mean, realistically, you can just take what I think I've seen this. I think actually a couple friends of mine might be doing this. What you can do is you can take your gamete, your sort of egg cell. You can take the genetic information from it, put it in a sperm cell, let that sperm cell just swim off.
Wow.
It's obviously much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
That's cool though.
Yeah, I've not looked into it very deeply, but I think that's something that is either possible now or they're working on and should be possible
It's like pretty much
soon.
done.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's
We're not going to be needed for much longer, are we?
no.
No.
I do literally have a line here saying that we're useless. Like males are biologically males are more or
Sex
less
is going to
useless.
devolve. It's going to go backwards.
Well, actually, some animals
gonna
have done that.
reassimilate.
There's actually a crayfish that is developed to be female. There's actually a few different kinds of species that have developed to be female only. Even Komodo dragons can produce parthenogenically.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a species of crayfish that is kind of apparently evolved from another species of crayfish to be female only. It doesn't need. They don't need males. In fact, there aren't any males. They reproduce via parthenogenesis.
Wow.
Yeah. Although obviously the genetic variation of that is there's only so long that it can necessarily last potentially. But no, I mean there's plenty of species that are thriving using that method. And I think the thing is, if you're not an obligate parthenogen, I guess, I don't know, if you don't need to reproduce via parthenogenesis, it is a great handy little thing to be able to do. You know, turkeys can do it.
Can they?
Really?
Yeah. Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah. Lots of different turkeys. Some sharks can do it. There was a hammerhead shark that did it in an aquarium a few years ago.
I remember reading about that, I think.
We did an episode on it.
Oh, yeah, we did as well. That's why.
Yeah.
That's why.
But yeah, no, there's it's definitely something that things can do. And the thing is that and we might have said this on the podcast before, and I want to correct that. I may have incorrectly labeled parthenogenesis as asexual reproduction upon further investigation. A lot of people do say it's asexual reproduction, and that's totally fair to say for one understanding of asexual reproduction. But if you actually look at the process, it's more akin to a sort of sexual reproduction that is kind of unfinished, or a modified version of sexual reproduction, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Wherein it's kind of got all the stuff there for sexual reproduction. It just kind of does it
With
on
yourself.
its own. Yeah.
Potential correction there.
Potential correction. There we go.
There you go.
There you go. So yeah, moving on from that, we've now got our gametes, but they're sitting in humans. They're sitting in two completely different organisms. What we gonna do? I mean, I say in humans, in most. Well, I mean, in humans, in mammals, in lots of fish.
Quite a lot of animals,
yeah,
actually.
in like lots and lots of animals. They're now sitting in two different organisms. What are we gonna do? How do we get them together?
Sex.
What I said earlier.
Yeah, sex. That's right.
There you go.
Well, that's not what you said earlier, actually.
No, I said something about willies.
Willies.
So we got two things
Yeah,
here. We got internal fertilization and external fertilization. And you're going to love the external fertilization.
Is that
Luke.
frogs?
Yeah, it is.
Hell
So
yeah.
internal fertilization, that's when the egg is fertilized by the sperm inside the body of one of the parents, usually via sexual intercourse, which is generally sticking a bit in. Generally, by the way, this is
Willy.
not. No.
Yeah. Oh.
No, generally.
Doesn't have to be willy.
No, I mean, it doesn't have to be. Hold on.
Stop getting carried away with willies,
Yeah.
James.
Damn it.
Generally, it's sticking a bit in and shooting your shot. But in some cases, lots of birds don't have.
Are they like a patch together or something.
Yeah,
don't
they just kind of hold it together, and like
yeah.
they got to hold on real
Ducks
tight.
like rub butts together, don't they?
No, ducks have
Oh.
penises. You've actually chosen one of the 3% of birds that do have penises. So well done on that. 97.
Which ones rub butts together? I know there's birds that rub butts.
Most
Well,
birds.
except
Most birds.
Every bird except ducks. How about that?
No.
3% of birds
mean,
don't do it.
no.
97% of birds.
3% of birds
Yeah.
are
So
ducks.
but 97% of birds, as I've said, they don't have sex organs in the way that we normally think of them. They don't have sort of penises
I
and
can't believe ducks have penises.
corkscrew penises as well.
Oh.
Yeah, they force that because the female duck has a corkscrewed vagina, but corkscrewed in the opposite way, and it can change the sort of the shape of it so that only when the female duck wants to have sex can the male duck really do it.
Brilliant work.
Yeah, so it's really good. But that's internal fertilization. Basically, you fertilize something inside of you fertilize the gamete inside of one of the sort of parents. Now, usually it's inside the female body after the male shoots its sperm in there.
Mm.
But there are, as I've said, there are rare examples, like we're talking about seahorses, where the female implants the eggs into the male, and the male fertilizes the eggs inside of its body, and then the offspring grow inside there.
Oh,
What-
so, right.
What about the female? So the female seahorse is what if not the fact that that one is carrying the offspring? What makes it a female seahorse? Is it the size of the gametes?
It's the gametes
Yeah.
that make it, and I suppose also, I don't know this for sure. It would be the genetics of it as well,
Right. Okay.
because if they've given my knowledge that I've now got, because I would have had this question before as well, but given
Yeah.
the knowledge that I've now got based on research for this episode, I would assume that seahorses, which are basically kind of modified pipefish, which is really cool. If you look at a pipefish and you look at a seahorse, you can kind of see how one's turned into the other. That's total thing. Just look that up. Look up a pipefish and look up a seahorse. But so I would assume that they've got gametes that are quite different, where there's one large one and one small one. The small one would be the sperm, which is in the male, and the large would be the one. The large one would be the one from the female. So I would assume that that's the case. And also, if you're looking at their genetics, probably chromosomally, if the sex is determined via chromosomes, it would probably be the case where their chromosomes match the male and females of other similar species. But yeah, I mean, fundamentally, I think really the kind of male-female
It doesn't matter. It doesn't exist. It's just
it does.
labels.
Yeah, the male-female dichotomy,
stuff.
it doesn't really... We very much think of like, females are the ones that grow it, and males are the ones that... But then that's not really the case for lots of animals. Internal fertilization, sure. So that, like, the females can either... it's fertilized inside of them, and they can then either sort of lay an egg, or they can sort of give birth to live young, or they can have an egg inside of them, which then hatches and live young comes out. So okay, so yeah, so they've got these things have got different names. So you've got Ovo Vivo Parity, which is when the embryo develops in an egg, which is stored inside the body of a parent until they're ready to hatch, which makes it seem like there's a live birth, but it's actually slightly different. So that happens in sharks and in rays.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Then you've also got ovoparity, which is when you lay an egg and then the egg hatches. That happens with reptiles. That happens with birds. You've got also it happens with. Okay, I need to mention this because someone's going to mention it. It also happens with, I think, 2 extant species of mammal: the echidna and the platypus.
Both Australian animals.
Yes,
Something's going on in Australia.
fantastic animals,
Yeah.
both with sort of beaks and bills. They're, oh my god, they're lovely.
Platypuses are so nice.
Platypuses are nice. Echidnas are
Yeah,
fantastic. You should
yeah.
see them trying to. Oh my god, they form sex trains. That's off topic. I was looking up echidna sex. They've got
It's an episode about sex.
they've got 4-headed penises.
So-
They've got a penis with
Sorry.
4 heads. It's
For
not that
what?
it's.
for doing it for
I don't think we really
4
know.
other echidnas, or
What? No, it's to choose
Just-
they choose one. I don't remember why. But they've got a 4-headed penis and it aids in something. But anyway,
Right.
basically, if you go to Australia, avoid it. The animals are weird there.
Everything.
They're either deadly or really weird.
Yeah, it's really
or
freaky.
in the case of a platypus, they've got a poison. They've got a venomous spur on the back of their. The males have got a venom. I think it's the males got a venomous spur on the back of their hind legs. So they're also dangerous, despite the fact that they're really cool and
But
cute.
they're really cuddly.
Yes. So back to sex. So you've got ovoparity, which is laying an egg. Offspring hatched from the egg happens in those two mammals that I just mentioned, and also snakes, other sort of reptiles, birds, all of that stuff. And then you've got viviparity, which is the one that we're normally quite accustomed to, which is when you give birth to live young. Now that happens in mammals, and interestingly, there's also marsupials where there's a very short incubation period. The mother then gives birth to the young, and then they've got what marsupials have got, which makes them which makes them their own thing. Yeah, they've got this other place for the young that is been born to go and then continue development.
So the obvious one is kangaroos.
Yeah, kangaroos.
Famous. Another Australian animal.
The thing is, most Australian animals, actually no, there is the marsupials are not. So people will tell you, and they will be wrong about this. People will tell you that marsupials are only native to Australia. That is not true because of the opossum, which is also a marsupial, which is native also to the Americas.
I don't think they were native to only Australia.
They are.
I didn't know that.
Other than the
really? I thought they were worldwide. It's just a different type of animal.
Are you kidding me? No.
Ah.
Australia's really weird. So opossums are also marsupials. Possums, the ones that play dead. Basically, pretty much every sort of mammal. Most of the mammals you'll know from Australia are marsupials. Koalas are marsupials. It's really interesting actually because you think of it just a little pouch for them to sit in, but actually it's a pouch for them to sort of
it's
grow.
almost like womb.
Yeah,
it's almost like a hole in the body. I saw a video of this on Twitter where it was like someone at a zoo who filmed a joey getting into the pouch, and it was just like you could just see all of the organ. I don't know if they were organs, but there was you could see inside of the kangaroo.
Yeah,
it was freaky.
People think of a pouch as like a cool little pocket.
Yeah, like a cool little pocket, right?
One of my favorite Simpsons jokes is from Bart versus Australia, where they decide to try and get away by riding in a kangaroo's pouch. They step in, and there's just mucus. and that is not the same as in cartoons.
Yeah, no.
But
nice.
Marsupials are really. I'd love to do a whole episode on marsupials. They're so interesting. But so that's what happens with marsupials. It's basically the same as mammals, but they do the rest of their development in that little pouch. So that's internal fertilization. That's the one that we normally know. As I've said, you shoot the sperm in.
That's what we do.
Yeah, you shoot the sperm in, and either the embryo, the sort of offspring develops in an egg outside the body, an egg inside the body, or just inside the body of the mother. This is something I was reading recently, by the way. So this is slightly off topic, but it's the amniotic fluid is very, very interesting. That's got something to do with whether because obviously with the amniotic fluid you need that, and that's basically what makes the mother kind of like an egg, if you know what I mean. If you didn't have that, you probably wouldn't be able to have offspring growing inside of you.
Yeah,
which is really interesting. There's something to do with that and gaining that adaptation and being able to live and reproduce outside of water. Quite interestingly.
Oh
yeah. So because otherwise most creatures would usually have to reproduce in water.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's entirely not the point. Then you've got external fertilization, which Luke brings on to the frogs, which as I'm fairly sure don't have penises because they would really have no need for them. So frog spawn, as you know, frog eggs, they just go into the water. The female shoots out a bunch of eggs, and the male is just like, I'm going to fertilize that.
Is that why Crazy Frog no longer has a penis? Is it to maintain biological accuracy?
I am sure it is. Let me just double check that.
I think so.
Yeah. So with frogs, they're mostly fertilized externally. So yeah, they don't have really any need to have a penis because all they need to do is swim over the frog spawn and just be like, shoot out their sperm, and then that develops into tadpoles. It develops into frogs.
They have a cloaca.
Cloaca. Okay, sure. I don't know if they do that. I know that chickens have that. That's
they have a cloaca.
Okay, cool.
What is a cloaca?
It's the one hole that you use for everything, basically.
Ah,
yeah,
cool. Yeah,
yeah,
that makes sense.
So that's external fertilization. That really only happens. That really only happens in water because it makes sense. Why would you do it outside of water? There's nothing. There's nothing for your sort of sperm to swim through. But yeah, you see that in amphibians, fish, lots of invertebrates, and in this case, a lot of the animals that use that will use the kind of method of throw enough at the wall and see what sticks. Like they just release a bunch of eggs because they don't need to worry about sort of gestating it. So whereas with if you've got sort of internal stuff, generally what you want to do is have one or two or a few up to anyway, like, obviously with opossums they can have like 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about like hundreds compared to tens, you want to have a few offspring that you can protect. Whereas these ones, when they're fertilized externally, you can't really sit around and protect them very well. So you just have loads and hope that if you make it, and obviously it works. So basically females will lay eggs, sometimes on a particular thing, and males will just go ahead and fertilize them. Often the sex cells of those of the animals that use external fertilization will have special sort of adaptions for moving through water. So kind of like sperm cells, how they've got the flagella. These animals' gametes will also have that to move through the water. The thing is, they don't really need semen because the sea is your semen.
As I always say.
Yes,
the sea is my semen.
So yeah, just that is sex. Just briefly, want to talk about the benefits and the disadvantages. Really broadly.
Time consuming.
Really broadly, the disadvantages, it takes time and energy to have sex. In fact, and you can have sexual dimorphism where one organism or one individual needs to press the other, so you need to put a lot of energy into that. And that, like, there is no reason for a peacock to have such a big tail. It's a pointless waste of energy.
That's true.
But it shows that it's a strong individual and it can produce offspring that will be able to waste energy on that tail. So it's useful in that sense. But sexual reproduction takes a lot of energy, and you need to spend time finding a compatible mate. You also need to spend time developing it either inside of you or outside of you. There's a lot of energy that's involved with it. But the advantages are that there's a lot of variation and adaptability, and also you can get a lot bigger as an organism. You can't really sort of develop asexually as big as we are. And parthenogenesis is not technically asexual reproduction. It's still got to come from sexual stuff. So you can get a lot bigger. And as I've said, the variation, like the fact that you can adapt to so many environments, you can pass genes down through generations, share genes down through generations is fantastic. That's kind of probably why sex developed, really.
Yeah.
And that is sex. So now you two can go off and have sex.
Wow.
I'm now
safely
educated enough
with whomever you
Sex
like that
University.
consents. Yes.
Sex University.
But that is it for today. If there's anything else you guys want to say, go ahead. But if not, that's fine.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
We've just done it for
Just
almost
let it
2 hours.
Yeah, true.
Let's let it end.
For 2 hours at this point.
Thank you for watching. You can find the full references for this episode in the description. Subscribe for new episodes every Sunday, and why not leave us a nice wee comment? You can support the pod at patreon.com/SciGuys, or you can find and contact us at SciGuysPod on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or you can send us an email at sciguyspod@gmail.com. I am not Corey everywhere.
I'm Jamkin everywhere.
I'm Luke Cutforth everywhere.
Wrap it before you tap it. Be safe.
Yeah, true. And don't double back it.